I thought I was baking in all this buffer into my business plan. And the truth is that the barriers were much higher. The costs to open were much greater. And the surprises were bigger.
David,
Yes, dear.
what do you think heaven's like?
Looking in your eyes?
Aw.
No. Picture it. Denver, early 2000s. No, it was Club Amsterdam, the after-hours club we used to go to.
Yeah, that's what I always say. And so many of our friends from those days say that too.
Yeah. It's interesting how you look over the generations for LGBT folks, it seems like we have all been looking for a place that we can call home, right? You think about the 70s here in New York City, there was Studio 54, Chaperone sings about the Abbey in her recent song. We're all looking for that place that we can call home.
Well, we all need our own pink pony club, right?
Right.
But unfortunately with social media, hookup apps, and especially since the pandemic, so many of these places have been closing down. And we need that safe space. We need that place of community, that place we can call our own, where we can find our tribe.
Yeah.
But that costs money.
It definitely does.
Fortunately, today's guest is helping to maintain that.
Welcome to another episode of Living Not So Fabulously. We're joined today by David DeParolesa, who is co-owner with his husband of New York City's VERS, a new kind of queer bar.
David is also the CEO of Give Lively, a philanthropist-funded tech company that provides digital fundraising tools for nonprofits. David joins us today to talk about what it was like opening a queer bar during the pandemic, even as queer bars around the country have been closing.
We thoroughly enjoyed a recent trip to VERS. We were quite surprised about how affordable and the great atmosphere that there was. Great people, great music. Props to Angel for that. So let's hear about David and opening his new bar.
So welcome to the show, David. We're excited to have you.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Only thing that David and I like more than business owners are business owners of bars.
Now,
We
why is
consider
that?
ourselves a connoisseur of a good martini. And we had the pleasure of visiting your bar VERS the other day, and we thoroughly enjoyed the dirty martini.
Thank you.
So your website says that you opened VERS because you wanted to redefine what the queer space or queer experience meant. What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, I mean, the question I asked myself was, why did I stop going out before the pandemic? Why did I dislike the spaces I was going to prior even to them closing? And the main things that hit were, I don't like the drinks.
Mm-hmm.
I don't actually enjoy drinking a vodka soda. I don't like that these places smell. I don't like that these places are so cramped. I don't like that they're so loud. And that might sound old and crotchety, but clearly there's a market for that, right? And so the hope was that we could be more upscale than a typical queer space. We could be more inclusive than most queer spaces have been in the past. And I think we've lived up to that thus far.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so we enjoyed, like I said, we enjoyed that martini, and we'll definitely be back. So you opened during the end of the pandemic. Could you have picked a worse time?
No, there was the opportune time.
Yeah.
No, it was only something I did because of the pandemic. And it arrived when we were coming out of it, which was exactly well-timed outside of kind of resurgences of COVID, to usher in this new wave of queer experiences. And, many followed after me. We're not the only new one in town.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you had the idea before the pandemic.
During the pandemic.
During the pandemic. And so you didn't launch until toward the end of the pandemic. How would you say your strategy of launching your business is maybe a little bit different than if the pandemic had never happened?
Well, so, I mean, of course, thinking about at the time, not knowing what it would look like in a year away from it actually opening, we were still sort of deep in it. So some of the thought was that we'd struggle to get parts, we'd struggle to get basic equipment, that we would need to think through what it would be like to have shortages of things, what would happen if people didn't want to touch a menu. Like these things that had to be dealt with during the pandemic were things we were prepared for. And luckily, outside of the supply chain stuff that did happen, we didn't have to deal with a lot of customer hesitation. And so it was nice that we opened in July 2022, which felt like a pretty awakening moment in time for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
You kind of mentioned this idea, at least for yourself personally, that you stopped going out to bars. And actually, we've seen that. Gregor Mattson in his book, I'm gonna forget
Who
the name
needs
of
gay bars?
Who Needs Gay Bars. He actually did the research and found that between 2012 and 2021, roughly 50% of gay bars across the country, queer bars across the country, have shut down. So the question is, with that kind of trend in the industry, what makes you think that the opening of new bar would make sense, financially or otherwise?
Well, one is that New York, I think, is an outlier, right? Like New York City has a vibrant queer culture unlike any other city. I grew up in Boston. Boston's clubs and bars were closing left and right. I felt the culture diminish. And coming to New York, it felt like the opposite. And prior to the pandemic, the gay bars that were open in Hell's Kitchen, at least, had lines out the door all the time. So to me, the demand was still there. You had a lot of new people moving into neighborhoods like Hell's Kitchen who could afford it for the first time because of the pandemic. Rent dropped. That's since changed. But so the market for that human connection is there. And in fact, because my day job, my primary job is sitting behind a desk and working at a tech company that I run, this is the human experience I think people were lacking. And so so far, that is holding true.
Yeah, I think definitely people wanted to get out after the pandemic. And I think especially here in New York, where we typically think about our personal spaces being a lot smaller, right? So we were itching to get out of those tiny personal spaces and out into social spaces where we could interact with people, because you can't have a group of 12 people come over when you've got a 500 square foot apartment.
And that's
right?
exactly right. We need third spaces. That's how New York thrives.
Yeah. Do you see other markets in the country where you think this might be replicable?
Nothing has pulled me. I mean, I really did this because I was a Hell's Kitchen resident and have been for 15 years. I felt like I knew Hell's Kitchen. I do think there's opportunity in places that are historically queer or have yet to really have like an upscale experience.
Somebody thinks that their market might be optimal to replicate your model. What few tips could you give them to, one, to research to make sure that's appropriate, and then two, some variables to consider when they open their bar, such as costs and whatnot?
I think one thing that was key, and my main comparison is Boston. If there isn't already a core critical mass of people who want to go out, I don't see that there's a lot of convincing you can do to get people out from the suburbs, in the case of Boston, into the city. Whereas New York, by nature is urban and it's easy for people to get around and they travel all the time. And then I'm, quite aware of the different regulatory environments in every city and state. Massachusetts has a very difficult liquor license situation where it costs $500,000 even to get the license.
Wow.
In most cases, you have to buy it from somebody else.
Wow.
Whereas in New York, it's a $2,000 per year, I believe, license. So and there's no limit or cap on them. So the accessibility of the licenses is really important too.
Yeah. You're looking for lower barriers to entry.
Yes.
Especially on the financial side, right? Because how long does it take to recoup your cost of a $500,000 liquor license versus a $2,000 liquor license?
Right, because there's only so much someone wants to pay for a vodka soda.
Yeah. Exactly.
What is the max on that?
It changes. I don't know.
So I'm curious, how do you identify if there is a core market? What resources or tools would you look at, or trends or patterns would you look at?
If there's a core market in a destination versus like in New York.
Yeah.
I think.
Are people just asking, are you seeing people pining for that? Kind of, have they shared that with you? Or were you on like, I don't know, Grindr and saying, there's a whole lot of people here. If we all had a good martini, we'd have a good time.
I'd say that's an interesting question I hadn't fully thought through. I mean, with New York, that you almost don't have to think about it. It's already there for you. And at least as someone who lives here, you experience it all the time. I'd say if there were other destinations that had a similar pattern of people who go out, where there's lots of parties organically springing up, maybe these are once a month or twice a month big parties, like some indication that there's already a population of people who want to go out. Perhaps there's some demographic information that could be useful too. Like if you know that there are queer people based on the census of a certain age with a certain income. But I don't know. I personally probably wouldn't open something in most other places.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, going back to the financials, one of the things that you shared with us before the interview was this idea that you thought that the benefits would be financial from opening the bar, but that has since changed. What are the benefits you're looking for now?
Yeah. So I thought naively, I guess, I thought I was baking in all this buffer into my business plan. I'm like, this will work because even if we only have 75 people in this space, any given time, we'll make money. And the truth is that the barriers were much higher. The costs to open were much greater. And the surprises were bigger. So, I had to move from thinking that this is going to recoup costs anytime soon to, well, what's the benefit of doing this? And really, I think it comes down to community, right? And building community. I mean, it's the reason why gay spaces have been the churches for so many queer people, the safe spaces. And seeing programming come to life, seeing like talent on stage, seeing we have rallies, we have fundraisers, we have people having a great time, and people from all backgrounds doing it is a different way to look at why this matters. I wish it would make money. I think it will eventually. But in the meantime, I'm looking at like, oh, that's a really, beautiful, we have a Broadway singer on the VERS stage. Like, how nice is that? Right.
Yeah, totally. So you're still at the point it has not yet made money. So you're still under the good graces of people enjoying themselves. And so I'm curious then, how long do you think it will be until you get to that point where you make money? What will it take for that to happen?
I've had to pivot my thinking. Initially, I thought this was just a matter of time. I think it may still be 5-6 years away. I'm 2 years in. It may be that opening another outpost, like something in Fire Island, Cherry Grove, or Provincetown even might offer some economies of scale that could help. And that's just something I'm now thinking about, right? And so in the meantime, it's how can I cut costs? How can I continue to deliver quality? How can I do that in a more economical fashion? But it will be a while before we get there.
So I'm curious then, for those who don't necessarily understand, how are you able to stay open then? Is this all being funded by a loan?
Yes, it is. So because I have a day job, my primary focus is running Give Lively, a tech company that helps nonprofits. And I get paid a salary for that. And that's why the loan, which is a friends and family loan, at a very reasonable rate, is able to sustain, because I have some really wonderful, generous people in my life who were willing to be kind about how this business is manifested and want to see a queer space take hold and uplift.
Yeah.
So it's a mission aligned group of individuals.
Nice.
Yeah, I think I don't have a question for that. I just think it's context that a lot of us don't think about when we're opening up a business. That a lot of it, the initial funding comes from yourself, friends, and family, and then whatever you can't get from those resources, you're oftentimes going to a bank. And we all know interest rates were higher recently than historically, and so we have all those added costs. I don't think people think about that when they're opening a bar, especially.
I don't know how. I really have built a new appreciation for small business owners who build these small restaurants that don't, I'm lucky that I had built a network of people who I knew would come out and support the bar. And I knew I did research, I did surveys. I knew that there was going to be a population in Hell's Kitchen, my network and beyond, that would come, and they did. But, someone who doesn't have those connections and opens up something that's maybe a little unusual, maybe it's, a particular kind of cuisine that people aren't typically used to. I don't know how they do it. And I have a brand new appreciation for them because it is very difficult.
So that was the first part of our interview with the other David.
What he shared about investing in his own business is very poignant and also applies to investing in the stock market. Yeah. Very often some of the best business ideas come from realizing that there's a product or service that doesn't already exist that we want. And if we want it, somebody else possibly wants it too.
So true.
He wanted a quality, inclusive queer bar that also served as a community space. So he built it, and clearly other people like it too.
And that kind of aligns with our investing strategy, and one that Warren Buffett proclaims, and that is invest in businesses that you know and like. So with that, we'll be right back after this break. Welcome back. We have more of David's interview to share with you.
I relate to this next segment because David shares how we as business owners don't always know what it's going to take or what it's going to cost to actually launch our business. And sometimes it's a good thing.
Yeah, I think that you have to remember that you're always researching and that you're not losing, you're either winning or you're learning, which can be a hard thing when it comes to numbers, especially when those numbers are, it costs $500,000 for a liquor license.
Yeah, that's the kind of number that makes me need a dirty martini at VERS, like a dirty martini with 3 R's. Thank you very much, Christina.
Right. On that note, let's check out David's interview.
About the time that you opened up, if I understand correctly, you started to get being vandalized?
Yeah.
Could you explain that story for us?
So we had bricks thrown at our windows 4 times in 2 months.
Oh, wow.
It was, at first, we just thought it was random. I expected, even in some cases, that we would get, you see broken glass all over New York, at least you did, at least, 2-3 years ago. So kind of wrote the first one off, and then it happened again only a few weeks later, and then it happened again days later and hours later.
Oh, wow.
So that's when the police got involved, the FBI got involved, because at that time there was also the Aurora, Colorado shootings.
Yes.
And the fear that this was some broader, part of an anti-gay mission that someone was on. Mm-hmm. And it was, a frightening time for everyone at the bar. No one was hurt, but it shook, confidence, and it was certainly scary. It became international news, which is mind-blowing to me.
Yeah. So how did that make your patrons then feel at that time? Did that scare people away a little bit, or how did they feel? Oh, really?
No, they came out in droves.
Oh,
they
really?
absolutely showed up. I mean, that's the thing about the queer community that I love and that I've always seen. It's like we show up for one another.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we had people offering to pay to replace our windows. We had people who came in just to say, like, we are not going to stand back and let this happen. I will stand here and physically make myself a person who protects this space. It was unbelievable to see.
Wow.
So the pink parasols, did they all
come out? They did come out, but there was some
That mentality, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was nice. It was
Yeah.
nice in that regard. I think it brought more people together than it separated.
Absolutely, that's awesome. So, but then how did it feel when you found out that you were being vandalized by a member of the community?
That was really tough. I mean, we learned later that he was paid by somebody else who has yet to be identified. And he was actually like in really bad place, and a drug addict who was like an easy one to throw it on. But it definitely took a little bit of what had been a feeling that started to bubble that this was an anti-gay thing, which it may still have been, because he was simply the vessel by which the vandalism occurred. But it sort of deflated the story the second that was announced.
Right. So, because I'd read that it was, he had said that it was standing up for a woman who had a problem with somebody at the bar, or an incident that was really made up.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, interesting. So I didn't know that he was paid. That's very interesting. So you already talked about how you're trying to get your legs. You're trying to monetize this business so that it can stay open, let alone try to make money for yourself.
The irony of it is we ended up doing better during that time, or we've been essentially breaking even. I maybe didn't say that at the upfront, but we haven't lost money. We just haven't made any. So it's been nice. We're kind of running.
Nice. Okay.
And so it didn't affect our bottom line at all. And it just made me realize, like, sort of the things that you have to buy as a business owner, these kinds of insurances, the kinds of protections, the kinds of security. And so there were different thoughts around what it meant financially, but luckily it didn't affect us.
Do you see any sort of trend, because of the upward trend in hate crimes, that there is the possibility that we have to pay kind of a hate tax for more insurance on our businesses?
Yeah, I mean, I had imagined that there'd be a need for insurance that would help protect against bodily injury and the kind of things that you'd think would happen at any bar. Interestingly enough, I think you don't get, as a queer space, you don't get the benefit from the insurance companies of being a generally less, there's fewer incidences at queer spaces, but you get no discount for that because the insurance companies don't discriminate, so to speak, about who they're offering insurance to. So, we're paying the same rate, and therefore we just have your typical standard insurance that any club or bar would have, and typically clubs and bars have a lot more incidences than we do. So we have standard insurance. That said, we have had to think about things like security more often than not.
So like bouncers or having cops on the scene or whatever?
We've worked with the local precinct about having more presence during certain times. We've had a active shooter training run by the LGBTQ liaisons at the Homeland Security Department and the FBI during Pride. It's something that's offered as a service as part of the security agencies of America's kind of work.
Yeah.
They actually had a representative from nearly every major agency, from community liaisons to the city, health, medical, Homeland Security. We did the active shooter training, the FBI. Very interesting to see the machinations of our government in support of our community. It was really great to see it.
So as you're articulating that, I'm just wondering to myself, when you were going through all that training and dealing with all those different branches of government, were you thinking, this isn't really what I got into?
Right.
I just wanted to have a good drink.
It's interesting because my work during the day is social impact and oriented in that. It felt natural I didn't feel like it was such a, it wasn't what I expected. It wasn't what I wanted. It's really that we're only here to have fun. It's supposed to be about joy, right? But I felt like I had enough wherewithal in my life in general to take this on. And in the case of the Homeland Security team coming in, I requested that myself, and I brought in other bars from the community so that we could share this experience together. So, it's a little bit of having a social awareness that's helped.
Absolutely.
So as we start to wrap this up, maybe if there are other queer folks who are listening, are there any tips that you would suggest that they take in advance before, or things that they can do to prepare for opening a place like this?
I think it would be wise to imagine that whatever buffer you build into any plan you have should be doubled or tripled.
Wow.
I also think that expectations just have to be set correctly. I can imagine someone wanting to open a queer coffee shop in a more rural town, and perhaps that's more financially viable because it's smaller with a lower cost and lower overhead. I think I went, if there's one lesson, it's I went for Midtown Manhattan, Hell's Kitchen, prime time, and that's a different barrier to get successful. So
you might have scaled up a little bit, maybe instead.
Maybe starting with a smaller spot, maybe more of a speakeasy vibe somewhere in Brooklyn would have been a good testing the waters, and then you upgrade to Hell's Kitchen. So making sure that you have an appropriate scale. I think that's the best advice I can give.
Well, thank you so much as someone who likes martinis and who likes your martinis. Thank you so much for opening up your purse.
We definitely will.
Thank you.
So that completes our interview with David.
It does. And one of the things I found very insightful is David wished that he had estimated higher opening and operating expenses.
Yeah, so I think the action step for budding entrepreneurs, LGBTQ plus or otherwise, is to, one, study the business models of the type of business you want to open, and know that it's not going to be an exact replica, even if it's a franchise.
Yeah, and I think probably one of the ways to do that is to connect with other business owners that are similar to yours, and you can do that through your local Chamber of Commerce or professional associations. 3, prepare those financials, especially for the long term, as David shared.
So with that, thank you for joining us. Until next time, stay fabulous.
This content was not intended to be financial advice and should not be used as a substitute for professional financial services.